But eventually, I found myself gravitating to a position I used to think was virtually insane and certainly never thought I would espouse, and that is that there was no historical Jesus at all. That Jesus is mythical all the way down. And I used to think it was crazy. You probably do too. You probably will when I'm done. But let me just give you the basic rudiments of why this seems to me so plausible a theory, though, of course, one can never know unless you've got a time machine you're willing to lend me. But it seems to me so plausible an alternative, I should think that the burden of proof is on the person that would say there was a historical Jesus. Well, the first thing is there's such a thing as the mythic hero archetype. There's a kind of a set of traits and events and so forth that recur in the stories of many mythical and half-mythical legendary people, from the Buddha to Alexander the Great, to Plato, to Krishna, to Apollonius of Tyana, to King Oedipus and so forth, and see if any of these things ring a bell. There's often a divine annunciation. A god announces to a woman that she is going to bear this great supernatural son, and then she does so in an irregular way. She might be a virgin, she might be married, but be impregnated by a god, etc. Then, as there are signs heralding the birth, and when he gets a little older, the savior, the hero, is a child prodigy and knows more than his teachers do, and so forth. He embarks on a ministry with some sort of an initiation rite, as with Jesus and Zoroaster. It was a kind of a baptism, and immediately here comes the devil, whatever name he bears in the different religions, and he tries to throw the hero off the track with temptations, but of course he'll have none of it and continues on in his mighty mission, which includes often healings and exorcisms. And there may even be stories where his ability to heal is contrasted with that of traditional shrines and medicine and doctors and so on, so that, you know, he's the great one, whether we're talking about Apollonius or Asclepius or whatever. Then eventually he's given great popular acclaim, sometimes considered to be a king, whether metaphorically or literally. And then the people turn against him. He is put to death, often on top of a hill. And then there is confusion over where the body is, or where was he buried. Nobody seems to know, as in Moses and Deuteronomy. And there may be an ascension into heaven, and before or after that, or both, there are appearances of the divine hero to his mourning disciples, in which he gives them a charge to go carry on his legacy. These bits and pieces, many of them, are told again and again, independently, as far as we can tell, about all sorts of figures all over the world and throughout history. Some of them may well have existed as historical figures, but there's not that much left over of a secular nature, you might say. If there was, I would say the Buddha, for instance. There might have been a Buddha, but it's highly doubtful. And I think the same is true about Jesus. Of course, every one of these items I mentioned occurs in the stories of Jesus in the Gospels. Well, I'm a big comic book fan. I love superheroes. I see all the movies and all that stuff. If somebody were to say to me that, you know, Superman really existed. Now, Captain Marvel, the Martian Manhunter, these, of course not. They're just fictitious superheroes. It's all imagination. But Superman really existed. You wouldn't really take that seriously. Unless you perhaps grew up believing that Superman was real, going to a faith community that worshipped Superman and so on, then you might find it hard to think out of that box. But it seems to me, yeah, why should we take one of these stories with all of these elements in it, the most exaggerated one of the bunch, and say, yeah, this time it really happened?